So, most of the time I like to preach on the gospel, but today I want to talk about Corinthians. And the reason I want to talk about Corinthians is because we hit last week and this week two of my favorite parts, which are right next to each other in the Bible, which discuss this sort of critically important part, both on a community and individual level, as who we are as Christians. This whole idea of when I'm with the Jews, I am like a Jew. When I am under the law, I am under the law, even though I'm not under the law, right? You following all that in there? When I'm with the Gentiles, I'm with the Gentiles. And I am who I am, but I am like them. This gets at this stretch that we have as Christian community and as individuals. It's this stretch and this pull between two forces. One force is the force of relevance. The other force is the force of having a message. See, we as Christians have a core message, core beliefs that is who we are. But then we got a lot of stuff that goes on in Christianity and Christian culture that surrounds that core message, core set of beliefs. And as we talked about a few weeks ago with language, you can change the language without changing the core. You can change the wrapping without changing the present. You can change what's out here as long as you know what's in here. But that is hard. And so what often happens for individuals, for communities, is you oscillate. On one hand, you can overcompensate on one side, in which you lose your core, and then the question becomes, yes, you are doing all these relevant things, but why? What are you actually about? On the other hand, you can grow your core so big, they have your own internal language, and your own way you have to say it, and your own theological treatises, and no one knows what you're talking about. And you grow to complete irrelevance. And this is sort of the history of Christianity, is that we sway between these two and are desperately always trying to find our balance. What makes it hard is that this isn't like trying to find your balance on a balance beam. This is like trying to find your balance on a balance beam that's moving and changing year from year, place to place. Let me explain what I mean with examples. So let's go over here for a second. The land where you work so much for relevance, you'll lose who you are. In Christian history, I'd say right now, we have a great example of that. That's non-denominationalism. The reason I say that is because think about it. A non-denominational pastor does not have to hold a particular theological view, right? A non-denominational pastor has no denominational authorities that make sure that what they say has anything to do with anything, right? Non-denominational pastors are not set, or churches are not set to a particular creed or set of ideas or anything. And when you look at like all non-denominationals as a group, they're all over the place on all sorts of things, right? The thing that's most common about them is what non-denominationals do is sort of like the GPT. They go out there and they look at what everyone else is saying and say, okay, people like it when that pastor says that, people like it when that pastor says that, people don't like when that pastor says that. I'll say the things that people like to hear. But that's not actually theology. Non-denominationalism comes and goes very quickly in American history. Y'all ever heard of the mainline denomination Disciples of Christ? Anyone? No? Yes? Maybe? Anyone heard of the evangelical denomination Church of Christ? All right? So those two used to be non-denominational until they became denominations. Because back in the 1840s, we had a rise of non-denominational local churches that said we should just be disciples of Christ, or we should just be churches about Christ. Let's get rid of all these ideas and ideals and all this theology junk, and we'll just have churches where we just believe in Jesus. And in the 1840s, when a lot of the mainlines, the Catholics, had really lost their way, and had become way too far in that direction, this flourished. Until people realized very quickly that there was not much beyond the rhetoric. Nothing really under the surface. There was no core, no root to hold on to. So they come, they flourish, and they go. And the remnants that were more mainline got together, created a confession, built a root, and became disciples of Christ. Another chunk of it went ahead, realized as things were starting to crash around them that they had to anchor themselves somewhere, so they anchored themselves in evangelical theology and became the Church of Christ. And so 2 new denominations were born. We are in the same mix, right? We have all these big non-denominationals popping up, but just like they did in the 1840s or they did in the 1760s, they will come. Most of them will go. That's why you never find old non-denominationals. No one ever celebrates their 100th year as a non-denominational church. And some of them will survive and probably create a new mainline denomination and probably create a new evangelical denomination in 20 or 30, 40 years. Just like they did before. Just like they did before Acts. There's a reason there's the United Churches of Christ, or the UCC. Similar history, many generations over there. See, if you don't have a root to hold to, if you don't have a center, eventually you lose yourself. Because you're essentially tethering yourself to a cloud. What you end up being is like that politician who's out there just telling everyone whatever they want to hear. You know, the one who proclaims things that you know, like, oh, come on, that's not true. I'll give you an example. It's like talking about old politicians. Who remembers Ford? Gerald Ford? Remember his run? All right. So when he was running, he went to the Southwest because he was really having trouble with voters in the Southwest. He goes to San Antonio, Texas, my hometown. This is a legend of my hometown now. He goes there and he says, folks, I am a true Southern Western person. Southern Western person is not a thing. Southwest, folks. Okay, Southern Western person. And you can tell that because I can eat a tamale while standing up. He then went on to eat the corn husk of a tamale. Most amazing thing. If you can find the video footage of that, it's amazing. One of my professors in political science had that. Terrifying. It's up there with like, what's your favorite meat, sir? Hot dog. Okay. So here's the thing. If we don't know what our center is, or if we lose our center, we just become adrift. It's like putting a rope around a cloud and hoping it anchors it down. You just float away. But there's a danger on the other side. The danger on the other side is that you take this core of belief and you grow it and 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 grow it until everything you think you like gets stuck in here. And if you don't do it this way, then you're not a real Christian or you're not a Christian. Right? We've all met those folks too. These are the folks who freak out if the acolyte does the candles in the wrong order at Advent. Okay? We've all met people who have meltdowns about that. I've met pastors that they're like, what are you doing? Eating soup and having a service in the same location? And I'm like, yeah. Like, you eat soup in your sanctuary? And I'm like, no, we do this all in the fellowship hall. You have church in your fellowship hall? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, how? And I'm like, here's the bulletin. They're like, but you're not singing harmony. And I'm like, yeah, there's also melody, and there's ELWs. We don't want to sing harmony, but grab it. How can you have a church without like 5-part harmony? I'm like, we do just fine. Okay? If you grow it too big, you start to just sound weird after a while. And the world looks at you going, what are you doing and why are you doing this? See, as with many things in Christianity, it's really about balance. It's about looking inside of ourselves, as individuals, as communities, as whatever we're talking about, and ask ourselves, what is that core? Christian history, as I talk about, has these ups and these downs, and ups and downs. Many people spend all this time studying the rises in Christianity. Like, why did Christianity take off at this point? I contend that historians spend way too much time looking at what was going on during the boom. What they need to look at is what ended the bust. Look at the bottom of the bottom and say, what changed when we were there? And I'll tell you, when you do that, whether or not it's mainline Christianity or Catholicism or evangelical Christianity, at the bottom of that bust, at the end of that cycle, you see the same thing happen. A group of Christians get together, they say, wow, things are really bad out there. Let's get back to the fundamentals. What is it core that we do? What is the stuff we're doing that isn't core. Let's start there, with mission and ministry. Folks, the reason we do the Apostles' Creed like just about every week is because in 300, a group of Christians got together and said, things are pretty bad out there. We should really get together and write down what is the core. Luther is best known for his small catechism because in his time, in his day, he said, folks, we got to sit down, figure out what's actually Christianity, and then what else we can keep or not keep, because what we're doing ain't working. We've gone to a bad place. Counter-Reformation did the same thing. Heck, y'all ever heard the term fundamentalist from the evangelicals? That's because a group of pastors got together and said things are really bad in the 1960s. Because it was, if you were an evangelical, they said, let's find the fundamental core beliefs of what it means to be a Christian, and let's start there. Okay? Now, I don't buy into what the fundamentalist answer to that question is, but it's the same practice. Figure out what the core is, so you can figure out what the possibilities are to reach the society we're in. Because if we don't know who we are, we may have no way of engaging anyone in anything. So as you go out today, the question I pose to you as individuals is this. If you were to write down what your core is, the core beliefs that you believe make you as a spiritual person, the truths you know to be true, what would it look like? As you go out this week, I challenge you. Sit down in your prayer life, get a blank piece of paper, or open that laptop, or get that tablet going, or whatever your favorite writing way is. And ask yourself that question. What is fundamental to Christianity? What is fundamental to me? What is fundamental to my spirituality? What is the message I have that God has given me? Write it down. See what you find.